Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Chris Kuehl. I'm with Dayton Children's Hospital, and I'm the Cybersecurity SIG Chair. And I'd like to extend a very warm and special welcome to each one of you that are here with us today for our 14th annual Taste of IT. Please join me in thanking our sponsors, Cincinnati State as a diamond sponsor, Cadre and Checkpoint and Okta, gold sponsors, 8451, ComSpark CDO, CyberRabbit, Dell, Exagrid, Extreme Networks, Franklin University, Gigamon, Nexagen, Sinclair, and Smart Data as our bronze. And to our annual partners, ATC, Affidence, CareSource, Cincinnati Bell, Google, Round Tower, UD, Wright State, and Uptime. We couldn't do this without you. So please join me in welcoming Amanda Sutherland and Chip Niemiller from Dell Technologies as they discuss We've Got Your 6 strategies for data protection across platforms. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda for introductions.
Thank you, Chris, and hello, everyone. I hope you all are staying well and healthy. Definitely want to take the time for joining the Dell team this morning for the next half an hour to 45 minutes as we talk about protecting your data across platforms as well as keeping it safe from cyber attacks. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Amanda Sutherland. I am the Central and Southern Ohio data protection specialist for Dell. With me today, I do have Chip Niemiller, who's a data protection engineer that I work with. And then joining us from our cyber recovery practice, we have Aaron Logue-Smith and Ed Fabruski. As we kind of open this up, I don't have to tell all of you how our lives have changed and have been impacted since March and how we're still adapting to that new normal, right? So from an IT perspective, we've seen an unprecedented acceleration into digital transformation since then, in which from a data protection standpoint, for us, highlights two different themes, right? So we've seen an increase in cloud adoption, which has allowed companies to adapt and service their end users in a remote workforce environment. And this led to more of a global challenge that corporations of all sizes have had to deal with, which is protection from cyber attacks. Dell surveys its data protection customers on a pretty regular basis. And earlier this year, we learned that due to the pandemic, cloud adoption has accelerated with companies sending about 50% of their mission critical applications to the cloud by the end of this year. With that, we've seen an uptick in cyber attacks by upwards of 4,000% per the FBI. So bad actors have been very crafty in gaining access to systems. In the next half an hour or so, we will touch on protecting data in the cloud and utilizing it as part of your data protection strategy, as well as keeping it safe from malicious attacks. So whether that be from outside or inside of your company walls. So with that being said, we'll start with cloud strategies with Chip Niemiller.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to kick this off first of all with a review of some surveys that were done earlier this year, and we pulled some key points out of that. The first one we found is that 94% of organizations are already using public cloud services in some form or fashion. Sometimes when we're talking to the IT departments, they might not even be aware that some of that's happening. Maybe a dev team has started using public cloud to run some test machines. So that percentage is very high, I feel. But as we dig into that a little bit more, another survey with Flexera shows that we're not just using one cloud or two clouds. The average for those organizations are really around 5 different cloud providers being used. The next one is talking about the on-premise workloads, where they're looking at and saying that about 75% of those workloads should be capable of moving to public cloud in the next 5 years. So that sounds great that, the potential of moving some of that data into the cloud. But what I see on that number there too is also that 25% is still going to remain on-prem. So we're going to have data in different locations on-prem and also in cloud. The top cloud protection use cases that we've seen over the past few years is the first one is really using public cloud as a backup or archive repository. So if you have long-term retention, instead of writing that out to tape, maybe now using the cloud in order to push that out and store the data there. And then the last one that we're seeing really an uptick on here is 39% are starting to use this as a disaster recovery target instead of having maybe a colo location, starting to use the cloud. So next slide, please, Amanda. So when we speak to organizations, the initial conversations, and they say they have a cloud initiative, first we have to determine what that cloud initiative is, because there are different use cases. But a lot of times the expectation is that, we're going to have our on-prem data, maybe we'll have a private cloud, some, storage on site that is object storage, and then we're going to have public cloud of some fashion. Next, please. But what we're really seeing is that 93% of customers will deploy in multiple clouds. So in reality, what we're looking at is you're going to have that on-prem data. You might have the private cloud, but then you're also going to have multiple public clouds. So it could be, maybe Salesforce, Office 365. Maybe we're using long-term retention. And we're really seeing a proliferation of management consoles in order to try and manage all this. So from a data protection standpoint, what we want to do is we really want to try and use the same solution that we're used to today with our on-prem protection. And as we move to the cloud, be able to use that same technology to protect that data in the cloud. So next slide, Amanda. As we're going through this, if you have any questions, if you just want to enter them in a chat, and we'll address those at the end of the presentation. As we move that data to the cloud, a lot of times we think, this relieves us of the duty of protecting that data. But really, as you see here, an example from Amazon Web Services, in their contract or customer agreement, it clearly states that you are still responsible to take action to secure, protect, and back up that data. So just because the data has been moved off site, it's still an asset to your company or organization, and we still need to protect that data like we would if it's on-prem. Next slide, please. So on this slide, this is really just talking about different use cases for the cloud. So if we start at the bottom of the slide here, we're seeing, probably what you have in your environment today, what type of workloads we're protecting: Exchange, SAP, Oracle, you might have VMware, Hyper-V, protecting that data on-prem. And typically what's happening is we're writing that to an on-prem appliance. So in this case, we're looking at the Dell Data Domain, writing it to that. Could be, whatever your backup target is today. What happens then is we traditionally see customers will write that to a secondary data center. So as we move from the middle to the right now, and the reason for that is really for disaster recovery, right? In case of something happening, a flood or a tornado, something come through, having that data at another location in order to be able to recover in case something does happen. But from what we're seeing now is really different use cases emerging for the cloud, right? So that's where we're at the very top of the screen now, and what those use cases are. So I was speaking before about, we talk to a customer and they say they have a cloud initiative. This is really now where we're going to dig in and say, okay, what is it that you're trying to do? Or do we have workloads in the cloud? Do we just need to move data to the cloud? What are we going to do here? So the first one on the left-hand side is really around long-term retention. And the long-term retention portion is really a tape replacement, right? There's dangers with tape as far as, one, are you going to be able to do a recovery from it, with the risk of that? But the secondary is really, if you have a long-term retention of 7 or 8 years, are you still going to have a tape drive around that you could do that recovery in case something happens and you need to get that data back? So by moving it off the cloud, now it's just sitting on object storage. We can retain that data out there for a longer period of time, and use your backup application to retrieve it back. And it's just like a read from disk at that point. The second use case is disaster recovery in the cloud. And what we're talking about here is the ability to take a VM and replicate that up into the cloud and run it in the cloud if necessary. And with the Cloud DR technology that we have, what that really means is every night you're going to do a traditional backup of your VM. So now you have your point in time backup, and then we're going to take a copy. We're going to send that up into the cloud. So we can use AWS, Azure, so you can see here on the slide. But a VMDK cannot run within a cloud. It has to be in the cloud format. So what we'll do behind the scenes is we orchestrate the conversion of that VM so that it can run in the cloud. And it'll just sit there. It's not going to start up. It's not using any resources. But if a disaster does happen, then you can go up there and you can click on failover, and it'll fail over and allow that VM to run in the cloud, and your end users have access to it. The other key point here is when the disaster is over and everything's back to normal on-prem, the ability to do that reverse. So we will now shut down that VM in the cloud. We'll do the automation to convert it back to a VMDK. We send it back to your primary, and then it can be running back on-prem again. The third use case is in-cloud protection. So this is where if you have workloads up in the cloud, the ability to actually protect them like you do your on-prem data. And this is where we start seeing, different consoles might start coming into play, and we really want to try and use the same technology to do on-prem and in cloud, and that's where Dell EMC comes into play. So we can use the same technology to do that and use the one console to manage all of that data protection for you. And then the very last one is just a backup to cloud. So as I was talking before about the secondary location, or colo, what we're seeing some customers doing now is using the cloud as that secondary site, and they can replicate their backups to the cloud and keep that for a period of time. And that way, if there is ever a disaster, they have that data somewhere at a different location so that they can do a recovery. And Amanda, that's all I had.
Perfect. Thanks, Chip. So the one thing I just want to talk about is around Dell Data Protection customers and how they're utilizing the cloud right now. Our solutions are available in the marketplace for Azure as well as AWS, and we're working with GCP to be available there as well. But currently, from a Dell Data Protection perspective, we have customers protecting up to, or over actually 3 exabytes of data in the cloud right now. And we've got over 1,000 customers that are utilizing our solutions in AWS, Azure, and Google. So with that being said, guys, we're going to transition into the cyber resiliency options for 2020 with Ed and Aaron.
Okay, can everybody hear me, and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Erin Logue Smith. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I'm a lawyer by trade. I've been working in data privacy and security for the past 10 years. Ed is going to dive into the cyber recovery solution itself. So Ed, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ed Fabushevsky, and I'm part of the DPS division, and I'm the team lead for the cyber recovery application, which is an app-based data domain.
So I'm going to be quick because we do have a hard stop at noon. I'm going to go through the cyber environment, legal and regulatory aspects today, and Ed's going to cover cyber recovery and how CyberSense works with the cyber recovery solution. So what we have up here on the screen, I'm going to start, with talking about what everyone's thinking about. I don't think this is new to anybody, but I still think it's important for us to discuss it because cyber attacks really are the new normal in our everyday lives. So we're hearing about it in the news, whether it's a Twitter hack or a Tesla employee being bribed by a Russian national to, be a bad actor, insider threat. The landscape is just getting worse and worse daily when we're seeing new and disturbing things every day. So what I'm really challenging, our customers, our partners, and ourselves, us as a group at Dell, to think about is we got to think about our data in a different way. Data is now the most valuable asset on the planet. It could be considered more valuable than oil, more than gold. Disaster recovery is no longer enough. So we need to challenge ourselves to really think about and embrace the idea of cyber resiliency as a practice, as a part of our essential data security plans. So there is no federal guidance, or I guess a federal regulation. There is guidance from federal bodies and agencies across the United States, as well as from GDPR in Europe. And they all kind of say the same thing. Protecting a copy of critical data offline in an isolated manner is the best known way to provide recovery from cyber attacks. So I'm going to dive a little deeper. There were some major announcements in October of this year as a direct result of the increasing cyber threat landscape. So first up, we had on October 1st, the U.S. Department of Treasury issued an advisory to alert organizations that paying a ransom to any entity on the SDN list of prohibited organizations violates U.S. law. So many well-known ransomware groups are currently on this list, with more being added daily. So the guidance itself states that companies that facilitate ransomware payments to cyber actors on behalf of victims not only encourages future ransomware payment demands, but also risks violating OFAC regulations. So in addition to that, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security also published a ransomware guide for best practices for addressing ransomware in response to the increasing cyber threat landscape. That guidance states that it is critical to maintain offline encrypted backups of data and to regularly test those backups. It goes on to state that it is important that backups are maintained offline, as many ransomware variants attempt to find and delete any accessible backups, usually in production too. So maintaining offline gold copy backups is more critical than ever because there is no need to pay a ransom for data that is readily accessible to your organization. So the thing we're going to be talking about today, the Cyber Recovery Vault, it can help your organizations protect themselves from ending up in double jeopardy. First, from having to pay a ransom to get your data back, and then from possibly having to pay a fine or worse from paying out the ransom itself. So in addition, the FBI, in conjunction with the HHS, also on October 28th, published an alert to address an increased and imminent cyber threat to hospitals across the United States. So what this is saying, federal agencies were warned that cyber criminals are unleashing a wave of data scrambling extortion attempts against U.S. healthcare systems. The attempts are designed to lock up hospital information systems. So the FBI is advising hospitals and healthcare providers to boost protection networks, ensure software updates are made, back up data, and monitor access to your systems closely. So while this particular ransomware attack is targeted towards the United States, we have seen cyber criminals attacking institutions across the globe, and there is a huge uptick in state and local governments that are being attacked as well. So as we've seen over the last couple months, the target and threat landscape is increasing exponentially. So they're also addressing, and in this advisory, they're also stating that you should look at the Department of Homeland Security's ransomware best practices guide. So sorry, I don't know why we weren't moving forward. Okay, so going to be quick because we have to drop at 12, but I just wanted to briefly touch upon the joint advisory and the ransomware best practices guide and what it has to say. So there are a number of things that it suggests. And first, they do suggest some network best practices. They want organizations to house backups offline. The guidance suggests that sensitive data should not reside on the same server and network segment as an email environment, because emails are really being targeted right now. Whoops, too quick. Okay, also from general ransomware best practices, they suggest to regularly back up the data, have an air gap, password protect, backup copies offline. Implement a recovery plan to maintain and retain multiple copies of sensitive or proprietary data in servers in a physically separate, secure, and isolated location. The FBI and HHS do not recommend paying ransoms. This goes back to the October 1st announcement by the Department of U.S. Treasury. I'm going to skip by this one because we kind of already talked about that. So again, the Cyber Recovery Vault can help organizations protect themselves from being double jeopardy. The guidance also states that you need to maintain gold copy images offline. And lastly, they are suggesting the development of a second air-gapped communications network that can provide a minimum standard of backup and support for hospital operations if the primary network becomes unavailable if and when it's needed. So, what we're really, focusing on here is you got to think about the Cyber Recovery Vault as your lifeboat. If everything goes down, your production data, your production network, everything is inaccessible, you got to think about the Cyber Recovery Vault as your last best means to recover gold copy images into production, and you can do it quickly. So I'm going to briefly touch upon this, not going to take too much time, but last week there was an official announcement that, Dell EMC Cyber Recovery Solution is the first solution provider that has been approved as an alliance partner with Sheltered Harbor. So Sheltered Harbor is, it was created 5 years ago by about 30 US financial institutions. And it was a direct response to the sudden and increasing cyber threat landscape that happened in 2015. So this is when Dell EMC began to start exploring the initial phases of what has become cyber recovery today. Sheltered Harbor's mission is to protect confidence in the financial system if a devastating event like a cyber attack causes an institution's critical systems to fail. So in short, it is designed to protect the financial system and the consumer while the bank can recover its systems. Next, we're going to talk about the NIST framework, and then I'm going to hand it over to Ed. So lastly, we see a lot of our customers talk about the first 4 pillars, and they have, policies, procedures in place that do a really good job. But where things are lacking and where it can fall apart is the recover piece. So what we're going to be talking about today, the Cyber Recovery Solution, it really does provide the management tools and the technology to perform the actual data recovery. So the solution will give you the ability to not just detect the malware, ransomware, whichever variant you're going to succumb to, but it also grants your organization the ability to quickly restore gold copies of your mission critical data into production. So it's literally like the marketing team wrote the FBI bulletin. We can do all of the things that the guidance is stating and suggesting from the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the HHS. So I'm going to let Ed dive into the solution now and really dig into the meat of how we can meet these regulatory requirements. As soon as I can stop sharing my screen, that is. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I need to just find my PowerPoint on here. And I can't. I'm going to use this one because we don't have a lot to work with here. But anyway, it's going to be same. I just used this and kicked off with this earlier, so we'll use the same slide deck. It's the power of Teams, right? Anyway, I'm going to go fairly quickly because we basically are give you some idea of if you look at the numbers on this screen and you look at the way our days typically go, you can see, we're basically back to back with customers all day long with this. I've been here a long time. I've never seen a product, that has this much interest, but it certainly is, it's a sign of the times, and COVID hasn't helped much, right? Everybody's working from home, and just the general security issues that brought with the whole picture. Ransomware attacks due to COVID changes have significantly increased the interest in this particular product. The cyber landscape today, what we're going to cover here is going to be a solution. Let's just look at the scenario. This is cyber destruction and two ways. Two things that would possibly happen here would be, and these guys can be in your system today for 150 to 170 days without anybody knowing they're there, moving laterally through the system, eventually picking up the plan and the items that he planned to attack to bring the most amount of money as far as ransom goes. But the classic one is to encrypt, the data that's on the disk on the primary systems, but to also take out the secondary storage so that you don't have a way to recover. So this is going to be a resiliency solution. All right, this is going to be a solution that's assuming that in the case of an attack and your backups and your primaries are gone, you have some place to go to get a backup copy that may be 24 hours old, because it's going to be backups. So we typically do every 24 hours. At least you'll have something and items in there, which will plan with you. What do you need in the vault? But from a resiliency factor, give you the ability to recover. Hold on one second. I didn't realize that I didn't expand this. There we go. Anyway, we've gone through Sheltered Harbor, but think about to give some idea of what Sheltered Harbor and how it started, Sheltered Harbor was initiated back in 2015 after the Sony attack. This solution within our organization was considered and eventually developed due to that same attack. And that was in a case where not only were they a customer attacked, but they really didn't have the ability to recover. So we're assuming everything in production is a target at this point, including the backup, certainly, including the backup administrator. In other words, if you're in this system for 150 to 170 days, one of your main goals is to become the backup administrator. Get those entitlements so you can simply, if anything, at least delete the backups and make it easier for yourself as far as destruction goes. So as far as what is the solution, this is the solution. All right, it's cyber recovery is an application providing you cyber resilience. And as resiliency, we're keeping, as the FBI highly recommends as of 3 weeks ago, taking copies of your backups, isolating them and isolating them into a secure offline environment. So in this particular case, this would be like you'd have your production data center, and maybe above this production data center that you see on the slide, there will be a disaster recovery site. If someone's in your production, they're in the DR, or if they're encrypting in production, it's simply being replicated to the disaster recovery site. So this is going to be a third tertiary copy of your data, selected data, your key franchise databases and application, so applications that you think you would need within the next 24 to 48 hours in order to get just the base business moving again. That's what we would expect to work with you to have over in the vault. All right. How this is going to be two data protection appliances here. We're going to take advantage and use the replication ports between the data domain that's in production and the data domain that's over in the vault. And we're going to have an application running on a server that's called Cyber Recovery, which is basically an application over top of the data domain that will enable the system to open up a protected single point of entry to bring in any changes from production over, let's just say every 24 hours, to update your backup copies that are in the vault and lock them also as immutable copies. So as this application, this was an isolated recovery solution, which some customers are still using today. That was the initial rollout of this type of product back in 2015, 2016. In this case, with Cyber Recovery, we're taking a server attached to the data domain, but we're putting an application over top of it, which is orchestration. You'll see that when we get to the dashboard. There's a built-in scheduler within the application, and the purpose of that is to automate the whole process. We'll create policies, which are job descriptions, load them up on the scheduler, and say your backups finish at 2 a.m. in the morning, at 3 a.m. in the morning. This Cyber Recovery server is going to send down some scripting, some commands down to the data domain itself. And the first thing that data domain is going to do is open up its replication port, which in sense will open up the replication port on the data domain that's in production and bring it's a dedupe we're working here. Bring in any changes that have taken place in the last backup, bring those change blocks over to the vault. When the last one comes in, we'll close up the air gap. And at that point, we have an updated copy of your backups that we assume we'll keep there. We'll lock it. Once it comes in, we'll apply retention lock, put it in a special directory. And if we're doing 14 days worth of retention lock, you would expect to find 14 days of backup copies sitting in the vault available to you in case of an event. Typically what a customer is going to do in these events is go into that repository and that directory and pick up the one from 24 hours ago and then use that after production is put back together again. That copy is what's going to be rehydrated in production to bring up your applications to start recovering. All right. We're going to have offline data analytics that can also complement this solution within the vault. So as a summary of the device, the vault is segmented off the production network. All right, there's a single protected point of entry through the air gap with a firewall. We'll set up that firewall so that the data domain, that the Cyber Recovery server as the application, the management application in the vault, it is the only port, the only application and the only server and any management capability that has SSH capability at that point. All the other capabilities for the data domain as far as the ports, they're all blocked. So what you're going to see here is a single protected point of entry to bring in any changes over the last 24 hours, the ability to lock it again. And then if you'd like as an option, because we still need protection here in the vault, have a protected single point of exit through the use of a one-way firewall, one-way VPN, or a data diode, a physical piece with a transmitter and a receiver one way, basically a DoD device, but they are commercial versions out that will give the cyber recovery server the ability to send any alerts and alarms through any of its activity and observations in the vault back to you at your workstation. All right, this is cyber recovery. This is the cyber recovery dashboard. So if you're back here on the cyber recovery server that's in the vault, that you're in. If you're looking at this screen, you're at that cyber recovery server in the vault. All right. It's a Docker-based application. You have a menu over here. The classic piece for this presentation we'll point out is the policies. When we set this up for the user, we'll create those job descriptions, and that person of job descriptions put on the scheduler is to automate the whole process of bringing in any changes since the last backup, putting in a special subdirectory in the file system in the data domain of the vault, give you the ability to view any copies relative to those policies that have been brought into the vault, and then retention locked up. We can automate that whole process for you. So offline analytics. This is an optional piece that you can add to the solution. All right, this is going to be another server. Both of these are Docker-based applications. Both of them are based on Swagger REST APIs, and there are REST APIs between those two servers that integrate them together. The primary integration point here is we're automating the process of opening the air gap and updating the copy in the vault. We could have another policy in there that's scheduled on the scheduler to take that copy that just came in, unlock it now, pass it to the cyber recovery server, and now have the cyber recovery server scan that copy for any indicators of corruption, deletion, malware, or ransomware. We could move this. Remember, we're bringing this into the vault, and it is a possibility that there is some ransomware and malware that may have already been in the backup copy. We could move. It would make sense possibly to move the CyberSense server over into production. Let's scan it before it goes in the vault. We could do that, but if somebody's in there for 150 to 170 days, they're going to find that CyberSense server and they're just going to turn off the alerts and alarms. So we require that the CyberSense server be in the vault so no one can tamper with it. And when that next copy comes in, as an option, we can hand it off to the CyberSense server, and it will start looking, going through file systems, chunking file systems and looking at each chunk of those file systems that were saved on the backup file. We're looking at each page of a database, looking for indicators of deletion, corruption, malware, or ransomware. If it finds anything as the CyberSense server, it'll send an alert, an alarm over to the dashboard, the data domain the cyber recovery dashboard that's on the cyber recovery server in the vault. But as an option, we said you could, create a single point of exit, protected single point of exit, to get those alerts and alarms and send them back to you over in production to at least get an indication of what's going on down there. So you don't have to go down to you don't need to go in the vault every 24 hours to manage this thing. Set it up so it can send data back to you, alerts and alarms. So that's really kind of the solution. The sweet spot would be adding the option, the CyberSense server to it. Let's move on to maybe a little bit about how CyberSense works. It does scan every day. It does pick up statistics when it does that scan on the latest backup file that came in, 106 now with the recent version, and it's going to use those statistics through every scan and analysis to start building out a database within the CyberSense server. And then that database is the beginning, after the first backup, of machine learning and artificial intelligence to go forward in time to take this application to the point to where if it sees something suspect 99.9% of the time, it's accurate as a scanning operation. At the end of it, if it does seem like, let's go to it. Yeah, I took the slide out. Let's go back to here. If you look at this dashboard, we've got critical alerts that can, let me put it this way. If CyberSense senses or finds a file system or a database or anything in the backup file that looks like it's an indicator of corruption or malware or ransomware, it'll tag that thing as a suspicious point in time copy. It'll send a critical alert to the dashboard, and then it can have the option to take that alert and alarm, and then also as a CyberSense server, look at the machine learning, use some artificial intelligence, build a forensic file for you, and send that back to you. So you have some better indicator of what's taking place, what user profile was used, what attack vector. So you have something to work with during your recovery, and also have something to work with to kind of get down to some root cause analysis of how this attack took place and where this projectile for destruction is based at the time. So to set up this environment with a customer, we would work with you. We have a number of PS engagements that are available to you for cyber recovery and the installation of cyber recovery. The first one's going to be a workshop. You do disaster recovery planning. This is something different. This is cyber recovery planning. And what we have here is the ability to sit down with you. Could take a day to really get the interested parties together and figure out what you want in the vault. We're not recommending that 100% of what you have be in the vault. What we're recommending is that you take, again, the signature applications and databases that you think you could use that would be in that recovered file, that backup file that you could use to bring up the applications that you think you'd need to get yourself to a bit of position where you could bring the business up within 24 to 48 hours. What are you going to put in the vault other than the file systems and the databases that are going to be locked in those immutable copies in the vault? Well, if you have the file systems and you have the databases, you also would need to have a way to get to them during the recovery. It's a possibility you may be rebuilding the disk arrays over in production. We have seen some big, massive attacks here. You may have to rebuild the network. It'd be nice if you had your configuration files over there for the IP network. You may want your Active Directory to immediately start setting up communications for the users back to those applications. At the end of this process and the end of the assessment, we would work with you to build out a run book, and that run book would basically be, looking at the things we brought in there, those that are most important to you. Let's go to page 1 and figure out what do we start first to start to bring the business back up and running again by using this recovery file, this backup file that was sitting in the vault. That's it. If we have any questions, do we have a Q&A at the end of this, or where are we at this point?
Yeah. Looking at the echo.
Okay.
Yeah. Guys, this is Amanda. I just want to share one more slide, if you don't mind, just to kind of tie this all together, because I know we jumped around from cloud to cyber recovery and cyber resiliency. So if I can get my PowerPoint back up. And it looks like I am having an issue with that. So for those of you listening, what I really wanted to just take a few minutes to kind of bring this back together. And the title of the presentation was "We Got Your Six." Dell Data Protection has your back, right? So in relation to protecting your data across multiple different platforms, so whether you're on-prem, you're virtualized, you're running workloads up in the cloud, as well as across different RTO and RPOs. So we can help you from a traditional data protection, backup and recovery. We can help you with continuous availability, long-term retention, and as Ed and Aaron talked about, the isolated recovery as well. And the Dell Data Protection platform has really matured over the past couple years. So we allow you to consume our solution and what's best for you. So whether it's that 3-tiered architecture, software writing to storage, from a converged perspective, software defined that can be deployed virtually on-prem and up in the cloud as well. So if you have any questions about what we can offer, we've got a few minutes here, or feel free to reach out to Chip and I with our profile information later today or tomorrow. So with that being said, Chris and team, I'm not sure if there's any questions in chat that we can address before we close out today.
I've been monitoring throughout and I have not seen any. So I'd like to do one more call out for questions before we wrap up this fantastic session. There was one that came through just now. Who monitors the dashboard?
The dashboard, let's look at the vault. We would imagine that as a vault, and physically as a vault also, in the production data center, we're going to have a cage. Let's imagine. So you're going to have a cage with the cyber recovery server and the data domain, and that's the target data domain with the cyber recovery server in the vault. Say it has 2 or 3 locks on it, so that 2 or 3 keys, and you have a community of group as far as access physically in there. But as far as working in that vault and having the dashboard, that dashboard is on the cyber recovery server in the vault. So you would be in that cyber recovery cage in that environment physically, and you'd have access to the dashboard and the ability to manage the environment from there. For protection purposes, obviously, we don't want it directly connected to production. You do have the option for a solution that we've qualified with this solution. It's from Unisys. It's called Stealth. If you go to their website, they'll have plenty of information and some videos on how it works. Stealth is an application originally come out for the DoD and then commercially available now that will take parts of your network and put them into a community of interest, a zero network environment, zero trust network, I'm sorry. So we would take the IP address of someone in production and then the IP address of the cyber recovery server in the vault. That would be a single community of interest. We would stealth out the IP addresses of each end of that community of interest, and that would give someone the ability to have the ability to come into the vault from production and manage the server or just monitor the dashboard within the cyber recovery vault itself. So there is a way with an additional application to enable you as a user to from your location to get into the vault and into that server. And the same for the CyberSense server, that would be active and available also. With that extra measure, you need a protected way for the 2 points of communications to take place without anyone being able to see them on the IP network, and that's what Stealth provides. Any questions?
All right. Just give it another minute for any more questions to roll in before we close out. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close out. That was a fantastic session. Definitely appreciate it. Special thanks to Dell for, as a featured sponsor for this session. Please remember to complete the survey for each session by finding the link in the My Agenda session descriptions, the same place that you clicked on to join this particular session. So by participating in the survey, you can ensure that your voice is heard to help shape the future of Technology First events. And thanks for taking the time to fill out the survey. So for now, we're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break so we can grab snacks, lunch, and also you can go check out the exhibitors and explore the event platform. The game code for this session is strategies. Again, the game code is strategies. So I hope you all have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
And explore the event